The state of Missouri gave tenants rental assistance money to keep them housed during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, many of those same tenants are facing eviction because the government social assistance did not fix the underlying problem. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's going over the problems with rental assistance and the problems with a lot of the socialized government programs that they put into place, thinking that they can solve people's problems by just throwing money at them, okay? Basically saying, hey, we're going to pay your rent for you. The problem is, though, that it doesn't solve the underlying issue. The underlying issue is that this person does not have the financial education and the ability to pay their own rent because they don't know what they're doing. They basically they have no financial education. Okay, they don't know how to budget. They don't know how to save and invest. They don't know how to pay their own bills, and they're dependent upon the government to take care of them. They treat the government as though it is a parent rather than saying, okay, this is a temporary thing where I need a little bit of help so that I can get back on my feet. A lot of the people in these programs, they see it as, okay, the government is going to be taking care of me for the rest of my life, and that means I only have to work half as hard. And then when that government assistance disappears, as it oftentimes does, those people, they sink straight to the bottom, and they lose their housing, they face eviction, they face all of the consequences just like a normal person should have to face. So yeah, the government really is making people weaker and more dependent by giving them this sort of assistance. And that's why I don't believe in these sort of programs at all. So, yeah, this story is coming out of the state of Missouri, which is one of the states where I invest. And they have proven just by the facts of this whole article that this is exactly what happens with these socialist programs in place. Okay. That's why I'm totally against them. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. So do you believe that these, rental assistance programs are actually helping these tenants long term? I'm not talking about, hey, this is helping a tenant be able to pay their rent for a month or two here and there. But my question is, do you think that these programs actually help people long term? And I'm talking more like programs more similar to like Section 8, where the tenants can be on them for years on end or for their whole lives. Do you think these programs are actually helping? Do you think it's helping people get people out of poverty? Or do you believe, like I do, that it's just creating a culture of dependence? Okay. So, anyway, let's get into this article. This article is coming from the Riverfront Times, and it says Missouri landlords who were paid to keep people housed are now evicting them. Some of St. Louis's biggest evictors also benefited heavily from the federally funded state assistance for housing relief. And they kind of put this article in, like the tone of the article is very anti-landlord, more like, well, why are the landlords evicting these people? But that is the right question to ask, but the whole tone of the article is wrong. The landlords are evicting the people for not paying their rent. And the rental assistance was supposed to help get these people back on their feet to the point where they'd be able to pay on their own again, and it didn't do that. So let's get into the article. Spanish Cove Townhomes by Pepper Pike Management is located off a busy road in Florissant. A sprawling set of apartments, it covers nearly 800 units. Yet there is an almost ghost town feel to the place. Many of the units are shiny and new, but remain empty, the result of a massive renovation that began more than a year ago. 3 years ago, Letitia Valiant lived here with her young son. They had a good life. But then the COVID-19 pandemic hit in 2020. Valiant lost her job in retail a year later and fell behind on rent, then faced eviction. So yeah, typical story. A lot of people ended up unemployed or underemployed, losing some of their wages or all of their wages due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, what isn't mentioned here in this article is that there was expanded unemployment benefits that were put out there that actually paid some people more money to stay unemployed than they were, making when they were working. So I'm not saying that was the case with this lady here. Okay. What I am saying is that with the unemployment benefits that she was receiving, she should have been able to pay her bills with that money. Not only that, but there were multiple different, like at least three different stimulus checks, all sorts of tax rebates, etc., to help people stay on their feet. Now, I don't know if she was writing those checks, signing those checks over to her landlord or not, right? All I know is that unfortunately, because she lost her job, she faced eviction. Now, what was happening, and I covered a lot of stories about where tenants were taking those expanded unemployment benefits and they were pocketing them. Okay, they were taking the stimulus checks and pocketing them, and then they weren't paying their rent, even though they had the ability to do so because they knew they didn't have to due to the COVID-19 eviction moratoriums. Okay, now this was them basically, big cash grab for them. And meanwhile, they stayed housed, they stayed in their apartments because, they couldn't be evicted. So I'm not saying that's the case with this lady. I'm just saying that this was more common than you thought. So anyway, let's get back into it. Valiant, I'm sorry, has heard from a neighbor about a new program called SAFHR, or State Assistance for Housing Relief. It was a Missouri run, federally funded program to help eligible tenants hurt financially by the COVID-19 pandemic. It provided rental and utility aid directly to landlords on behalf of tenants, as well as mortgage assistance for homeowners. Valiant remembers asking someone in the Spanish Cove manager's office about applying for SAFHR. They said they weren't getting SAFHR, she recalls. They didn't want to deal with it, but that wasn't true. As it turns out, Spanish Cove's owners received more than 1.25 million dollars in SAFHR funding in 2021 and 2022, according to records from the Missouri Housing Development Commission, which oversees the program. Despite the infusion of taxpayer cash to keep people housed, Spanish Cove filed eviction proceedings against 259 tenants in 2022, according to St. Louis County court records. So, this apartment complex, in spite of the fact that they had received some federal assistance for tenants, still filed, what does it say, 259 evictions against tenants. Now, what isn't mentioned in this article, and they kind of alluded to it earlier, was that this building is going under major renovations right now. And that's part of the reason why it feels like a ghost town. So these landlords might have been wanting to evict these tenants whether they received assistance or not. Now the assistance money they received might only be paying the back rent that was already supposed to have been paid to them by these tenants. So that doesn't mean that they never can file eviction against those tenants going forward for future months of rents that they haven't paid. That just means that, hey, your previous debts were paid off. So yeah, I mean, they're trying to paint this landlord with a bad image for having received this money, but there needs to be more clarification of, okay, what was the money used for? Why were these evictions actually filed? Is the landlord actually in the wrong? And I don't think the landlord is in the wrong. Okay, I believe that personally they are trying to rehab this property, and that's the real reason why they moved to evict 259 tenants. Now, no landlord in their right mind would want to remove, even with an 800 unit apartment complex. We're talking about more than a quarter, so you'd have more than 25% vacancy. So if you would do everything you could in order to keep as many tenants in there as possible, unless you are working on a major renovation where you need those units empty. Okay, so yeah, it just, the story is misleading. That's what I'm trying to say. And from a landlord's perspective, I can see why these things are happening the way they are. But you know, the, I've never seen a lot of these publications want to paint a landlord with the a good image. Okay, they want to make us all look bad, and that is their goal. For months, Valiant and her son struggled to find a new place to live, but her eviction history made it hard. It really hurt my life, Valiant says of her eviction. I can't get any apartments. It's on my record. The apartment complex owner, Pepper Pike Capital Partners of Orange Village, Ohio, did not return calls seeking comment. Eviction filings have always come fast and cheap in Missouri, a legacy of Missouri's long history of weak tenant protections. Yep, and those weak tenant protections are exactly why I invest there, okay? Like I've told you many times on this channel, I own 6 duplexes in Independence, Missouri. And it's not that the tenant protections are weak, it is that the landlord rights, the property rights for those who own property are strong, okay? Stronger than they are in many other states. And that's where I believe that landlords should invest. That's where I believe tenants should live, okay? This is one of the best states for landlords as well because housing costs are lower. They don't even seem to realize, oh, well, the states with the strongest tenant protections are the most expensive places for tenants to live in the entire country. The states with the least so-called tenant protections, right, the most property rights, the most landlord rights, are the places that are the least expensive to live in the entire country. So if you want to be able to afford your housing, you can live in Missouri or Nebraska or the Midwest or the South where the property rights are stronger. If you want to have strong tenant rights but not be able to pay your rent, you go on and move up to New York. You go move to California or Oregon or Seattle, Washington, or wherever, okay? But that is the trade-off for these strong tenant protections. Using a list developed by the Eviction Lab at Princeton University, the River City Journalism Fund filed sunshine law requests with state administrators seeking to learn how much SAFHR funding had been granted to the 5 landlords responsible for the most evictions in the St. Louis area last year. We also requested funding totals for another dozen landlords with significant Missouri holdings. While the state initially declined to turn over those records when pushed, they ultimately provided the amount each landlord received through the SAFHR program. So, like I said before, right? This article was written in the perspective of, hey, these landlords are doing something wrong. They have no clue what the financials of these landlords are. They don't know, they all they know is how much the landlords received. Just because a landlord received X amount of money doesn't mean that they weren't owed double or triple that amount. It doesn't mean that the landlord was not, was only paid for, up to a certain month, right? For the debt owed to them up to a certain month. And that going forward, yeah, they had to file those evictions against those same tenants because those tenants accrued more debt against them. Okay. So, and it also doesn't mean that, hey, we're not, my assumption is that these landlords are following the law. Okay. That is my assumption. These are not, small mom and pop landlords who are just evil. Okay. These are businesses, and these businesses cannot afford to keep people in their properties who are not paying rent. That's not the way that any business operates. That would be like going down to the grocery store and them just handing out free food for no reason. Not going to happen. So, but one of the things that I will say is that, just like I said before, these programs, they create a system of dependence, a dependence by these tenants, right? And like this tenant here in the article who was featured, yeah, she got evicted. She got evicted from this place, and she has struggled ever since because of that eviction on her record. But that is part of the reason why these tenants need this sort of financial education, so that one, they don't face eviction in the first place, but two, if they do get evicted, then they're able to get back on their feet. And that is not the kind of thing, instead, what they want is they want more government money to be able to feed these rental assistance programs. And yeah, you know what? Everybody will be able to pay their rent if the government pays it for you. But the only thing you're doing is, one, you're creating a system where those who have jobs and money have to pay for those who don't have jobs and money. And believe me, there will be a much larger percentage of people who decide not to work if you give them money. And we saw this. We all just saw this just a few years back with the whole pandemic nonsense. So anyway, hate socialism. I hate how they always try to make landlords look bad. And you know what? I'm on the side of these landlords here that they should have gone ahead and filed these evictions. And, I already explained exactly why.